Welcome back to Dukascopy TV. I'm Elaine Stenson. I'm joined in the studio now by Ivetta Gerasimchuk from the International Institute for Sustainable Development here in Geneva. Ivetta, you're very welcome to the studio. Can you tell me about your area of work?
The sustainable development is about reconciling the interests of economic growth, social justice, and conservation of the environment. I work for the International Institute for Sustainable Development. It was established about 20 years ago, and by now it has become a global institution with offices in Winnipeg, Ottawa, in Canada, in New York, here in Geneva, in Switzerland, and also in Beijing. We work in both developed and developing countries on policy research and policy advice. And I particularly work in the team that specializes in energy policy, energy pricing, and energy taxation.
Okay, and energy policy is in the news virtually every day. The issues can be complex. There are numerous issues. But what's the key question in terms of energy policy right now?
The sustainable development approach is all about the interests of future generations in balance with interests of the present generations. And the answer to your question in this respect is the need to transition to cheap, clean, accessible energy.
Cheap, clean, accessible energy is an interesting formula in terms of the energy we use now in terms of is coal, gas and oil. They're not clean energy, but can clean energy be cheap?
That's an excellent question. The answer is that costs and prices are not exactly the same thing. There are social costs of fossil fuels, of oil and gas. For instance, the cost of pollution, the cost of climate change resulting from greenhouse gas emissions, cost of oil spills, and some other negative impacts on the environment and the society that are not internalized into prices of fossil fuels at the moment. And from this perspective, it's really fossil fuels, oil and gas and coal that are really costly. In contrast, renewable energy doesn't have this negative social costs, and the cost of generating it over the past decade has really dropped. We have some information here from the US Energy Information Administration showing how it dropped from 48 cents per kilowatt in 2004 to 23 cents in 2010, and the forecast, again from the Americans, but it's also the trend in some other countries around the world, is that it will go as low as, for instance, 6 cents per kilowatt. And this trajectory, of course, makes renewable energy competitive in many countries of the world already now.
We sometimes hear that the world is about to deplete its oil and gas reserves and we will face an energy deficit. How accurate do you think that this is?
I don't think that we are really running out of oil and gas reserves. We have discoveries in the countries that have never thought about producing oil and gas, for instance, Cyprus or Israel. But I can quote this gentleman. This is Sheikh Ahmed Zaki Yamani, who was the oil minister of Saudi Arabia in the 70s and was one of the people behind the organization of petroleum exporting countries. So he said already at that time that the Stone Age didn't end for lack of stone, and the oil age will end long before the world runs out of oil. What he really means is that energy technology progress, energy efficiency can make fossil fuels obsolete, like it happened, for instance, with modern technology for computers and framework computers. So now it's happening also with renewable energy becoming more competitive.
And in this respect, what's your advice to investors? Should they be adding clean technology to their investment portfolios?
Yes, but even more important advice is to think long term. Because if investors still chase short-term profits, what can happen is that we can see a clean tech bubble. There are a lot of parallels between the clean tech and information technology. It's not by chance that a lot of interest in Clean tech comes from California, from the Silicon Valley. Here is one of the products of the Silicon Valley, which is an electric car, a luxury car called Tesla. It's called after one of the most brilliant inventors of the 20th century, Nikola Tesla, who was talking about free energy for all. So it's now with the vision that is also on the mind of some really innovative investors. But we should be thinking of longer-term trajectory for this type of investment, which requires two things. First, it's government policy that has to give clear signals to the investors. And secondly, investors themselves changing their attitude and thinking more about longer-term profits. This, again, has to be underpinned by very sound policy research, and this is something that our organization is trying to do.
Ivetta from the International Institute for Sustainable Development, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for your questions.
And that's all we have time for now, but do check back later for further updates and interviews from the Dukascopy TV team. Bye for now.